adjustment table. And Patrick will make another roll, and if it's 6 or more, then we're going to get a wind change. Oh.
It's locked at 0. Bummer.
Boring. Yeah. So the result is no change, so there's actually no wind change after all. Alright, well, we'll stick with what we got. So, it's time to do commands again. Okay, so my situation here now is I do have one ship, the Robust, out there in front, that he is not eligible to be in any kind of command. He can't be in a formation since he's facing a different direction than the other guys behind him. And he's just out of range of Arbuthnot there with his 7, or I'm sorry, actually, yes, he is. He's still 1 hex away. He's 8 hexes away from Arbuthnot's ship. So he's going to be marked as out of command. And when it comes time to move him, I'll explain what's going to happen there. But for now, I'll just figure out what the other commands are going to be. I think I'll stick with the same thing I did last time. So it's Arbuthnot with the 3 ships, the one he's on and the 2 ahead of him, and then Graves with the other. And both of those guys will be doing formation commands.
I will continue with my 2 separate formations.
Okay. Then it's time for another initiative roll. Oh, there we go. 9 plus 2, 11, so you can't beat that.
Watch me, Frenchie! Englander.
Boo! All right.
What, the roll or the accent?
So what was that? Someone had a question?
Yeah, I said swing and a miss there, Frenchie.
Yeah, there you go. Alright, so it's my choice now, and I think I am going to pass to Patrick, so you may move first.
Okay. I will move the rear command first.
Cunning. And by the way, I don't know if we mentioned it when we were talking about side slipping last time, but that maneuver costs 2 movement points. So it's basically, it costs the same amount of movement points to do as if you actually turned the ship around the bow and moved up one. But it just doesn't involve the actual turning, so you can keep facing the same direction.
Okay.
Alright, my turn. So I'm going to go ahead and move Robust first. So he is now reaching. So he's got 6 movement points, but he's out of command. So what I have to do is make a die roll for him. So what you have to do is you make a roll and you compare it to your fleet's audacity. And if it's equal to or less than your audacity, that ship can move just like he normally would and fire if he has a chance to, as he normally would. If you fail the roll, there are 2 restrictions. The ship cannot fire offensively. He can still use defensive fire later on in his turn, but he can't fire while he's moving. The second restriction is that he can't end his move adjacent to an enemy ship. Obviously, not an issue here, but if we were a little bit closer, it might be.
So out of command ships move first, right?
No, they don't have to. I could move other ships if I wanted to. But since he's up here at the head, I am going to go ahead and move him. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a maneuver I don't think we've done yet here called back in sails. So when you back sails, you burn a movement point, but you don't move. You just stay right where you are. You can only do that once per hex. And you can only do it, you take your initial movement allowance and you cut that in half. That's how many hexes you're allowed to back sails in maximum. So since I've got 6 movement points, I can do this a maximum of 3 times during my move here. So what I'll do is, with Robust here, he's going to back sails for his first movement point. Move ahead for 2. Back sails again for 3. Ahead for 4. Back sails for 5. That's the last time he can do it. And then up for 6 to spend his full movement allowance.
Give him a wiggle.
Everybody see him up there? Ends up in 33, 34.
Now, you have to roll dice for that, right?
Oh yeah, I didn't even make the roll since I I talked about it, but I didn't actually do it. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do this. I'm not going to fire anyway, so it actually isn't going to have any effect, but I will make the roll. Alright, so I failed it since my audacity is 0, so during that move I'm not allowed to fire at the French at all. So I won't. I will just move and end up right there. Okay, so now here's the exception we were talking about. I've moved Robust, so now normally it would pass back to Patrick. But since the ship that I just moved here was out of command, he can pass it immediately back to me and force me to move another one of my commands first before he has to move his second one. And the reason we put that in there is because we realized there was sort of a gamey tactic you can do. Usually you would take like maybe 1 or 2 ships at the end of your line that were way away from the action and weren't going to get to fire anyway. And it sometimes was a good idea to turn them purposefully to put them out of command. And that would give you an artificial way to ensure that regardless of whether you won or lost the initiative, you'd be able to see where the other guy moved first. So you'd activate your out-of-command ship, and then it would pass back to him, and he'd have to move all of his. So it was just a very artificial way to make the other guy move first. So that's why we put in this exception here. So it passes over to Patrick, and you may either move or make me move something else.
I will pass it back to you.
Alright, I thought you might. Well, I'm going to try and get Arbuthnot closer up here so that he can maybe get these guys back in command. So I'm going to activate his command next with his 3 ships. So Europe will move up. So these guys now are back to beating, so they are 3 movement points. So Europe will go up for 1. And he's going to turn here. I don't know if this will show up, so I'll talk through what I'm doing. He's turning to face the same direction as Robust. And then ahead for 2 more. And he ends up there in 3303. And then the other 2 ships will just both move ahead for 3. Okay. And that's that move. So now it passes back to Patrick, and now he does have to move something. He cannot pass it back to me this time.
All right, we will start with the Vanguard here. And I can make that free turn at the very end, correct?
No, well, that'll cost you 1 movement point, since you're going from reaching to running.
Oh, sure enough. Okay.
In that case, the breezy wind, that does not add +1 to that. That's still just 1 movement point to make that move.
Okay. Then I will make this. I'll use that last point here and just do another turn.
You have to wiggle that ship there, Patrick.
Yeah, I was just saying, gotta... Shit, there we go. That's where he is, okay.
Okay, and I can fire now.
Yes, you can.
What are the range of the guns, by the way?
Let's find out.
Max... Yeah, there you go. The maximum range you can fire at on flying colors is 10 hexes.
Okay,
All
we
right,
will loose a port broadside on you.
Okay, so Patrick is shooting here. So before he does that, the normal way with defensive fire, whenever you get shot at by the other guy, you usually have an opportunity to shoot back first as defensive fire. There's 2 ways to work that. The standard way, which I think we'll use here tonight, is that you can only defensive fire when you're actually being shot at. There is an optional rule that a lot of us use that allows you to use defensive fire with every movement point spent by the other fleet. So basically it lets you shoot at them while they're moving before they've declared any fire. It does slow things down a little bit, and that's why I figured we won't use that here tonight. But with the standard rule, it's just whenever he declares he's shooting at somebody, I now get the chance here to shoot back at him with any one ship that's eligible here. Does not have to be the one that he's shooting at. It could be, in this case, I've got 2 choices here. It could be either Robust or Europe. They're both eligible to shoot back at him. I think I'm going to go ahead and use Robust here. So even though he's out of command, like we were saying earlier, he can still use defensive fire. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do here. Alright, so now we're going to talk through how to resolve fire. The first time you do this or so, it may seem a little complex, and you have to check a few different tables, but it's one of those things that I think Patrick can probably attest to, that after you go through it a few times, it becomes very second nature. You just have to kind of get some practice with it. So, what we're going to do here is start out by looking at the number in the top left corner. For Robust, that's 3. That's the relative rate, which mostly matches up with historically what the rating of that ship was. These are 74 gun third-rate ships, so he's got 3 for his rating. So where we're going to look first is on the firepower determination table on the charts. So if you go to that and you look along the left-hand side of that chart under the relative rate column, we're going to start with 3. And then we're going to count the range here. It looks like you are 5 hexes away from me.
Is this the chart labeled firing versus large vessels?
No, we're on the firepower determination table, Charles. That's where you're at is where we're going to end up. But look at the front of the player aid card if you're looking at that.
Is it in the Vassal module?
Yes, under firing, on the right-hand side, you can see carronades, firepower, and rake. So it's the middle one, firepower.
You might have to resize that window, Charles. I know when I open it up, I don't see the menu on the right-hand side, but if you drag that little menu divider over, you'll see there's actually 3 charts to look at under that tab.
Got it.
There you go. So, cross-referencing 3 with the rate with 5 with the range, that's given me, it says a 5 firepower. So we start off with 5, and now looking at the modifiers under this, we're going to see if anything modifies that. First, I would have looked to see if my relative rate actually had been modified. If you look at those modifiers, none of those things are applying here. The most common ones would be if you're under full sails, or if you're on fire. Those are probably the most commonly used ones. Or actually for every 6 hull hits when we start getting shot at. But none of those things are affecting me yet. So, looking further
Rob,
down,
do you want to explain how that works as far as moving the relative rate up and on the y-axis there?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. So that some people do get confused by that at first too. Yeah, you say I was at full sails. It's telling me it's +1 to my relative rate, so it's just 3 + 1. I would become a 4 relative rate. So I move up that firepower determination table. And if you look at those numbers, you know, they get less and less the further up on the y-axis you go. So you want low relative rate numbers and high firepower numbers. So once you have that firepower number, which is 5 for me, you look at the firepower modifiers. I don't have, if you look at the relative rate numbers on those counters, you'll see how Robust actually does not have a symbol behind his 3. But Patrick's ship over there, the Conquerant, I think, does have a white circle behind it. Those white circles, if you look at the firepower modifiers, you see that adds 1 to your firepower number. So the important thing here is that it's important not to get those confused with the relative rate numbers. These firepower modifiers are modifying that firepower number we came up with, not the relative rate. So since I had 5 for my firepower, let's see, do any of these other, no, it doesn't look like any of these other modifiers apply to me, but say I did have a white circle behind that 3 on my counter, I would have +1, so instead of 5 I would have 6 firepower. But that doesn't apply here, so it looks like it's just 5 firepower for me. The other most commonly modifiers there are the carronades. Those only come into play when we get within 3 hexes of each other. And we're not quite there yet, so we don't have any carronade bonuses coming into play just yet. So now, Charles, we go over to that chart that you were on to start with, the hit results table. And we're going to look on the top half of the chart. There's a firing versus large vessels and firing versus small vessels. And the French do have 1 small vessel in this battle, but he's not anywhere up here where I can shoot at him yet. So we're looking at firing versus large vessels. And we're going to look at the 5 column. And each column is split into 2 halves there, rigging on the left and hull on the right. So right now, I've got to decide if I'm going to shoot at his rigging or at his hull. If I want to slow him down or actually batter the hull of his ship and lessen his firepower. I think, because you're upwind of me, I'm going to shoot at your rigging. So I am shooting at your rigging, and if you go down to the very bottom of this chart, there's one more set of modifiers to look at. It's down there in the lower left-hand corner. And we're looking at die roll modifiers under rigging target modifiers. And one of these is going to apply to me. It says +1 if firing into the wind. And I am firing into the wind here. This is another thing that sometimes gives new players trouble, so let me demonstrate this right now while we're talking about it. So here's the wind marker right next to me. If you look at those modifiers, whether you're firing at the rigging or the hull, there's one, either firing into the wind or with the wind, you're going to be either get a bonus or be penalized, depending on which one you're shooting at. So the way to figure that out is you just look at where the wind is in relation to your ship. Where the other guy's ship actually doesn't matter at all. So for me, when I'm firing my starboard broadside the way I'm right here, this is firing into the wind. And if the wind were like that, this would be firing with the wind. As would that. And then if I were either in irons like this, or if the wind were, if I were running like that, if the wind were blowing directly up or down the length of my ship, I wouldn't get any bonus, because that's not into or with the wind. It's just neutral. So that's the quick and dirty way just to know which bonus you get. So for us, I am shooting into the wind, so I get +1 for that. And that's the only thing that applies. So it looks like what we're going to do here is I'm going to roll a die. I'm rolling on the 5 column on the left-hand side of the column under the R section, and I'm adding 1 to my roll. So I'll go ahead and make the roll, and we'll see what happens. All right, starting out nice and small to work our way up. So 1
You got a rig
becomes
hit.
2, which is 1 rigging hit. All right, still got something.